Hi everyone, Stepan here. Today I'm going to show you a game after which... Okay, this was round 8, so there was the last round to be played the following morning. So after the game finished, I just sent messages to all of my friends, to my coach and to my family. Just don't ask me anything about the game. It was... you could watch the game live, so everyone watched it live. And they saw the position. And you're gonna see what happened. I was well, it's an understatement to say I was irritated. Okay, so I started pawn to d4, and I've been preparing the modern Benoni for hours. My opponent in this game is rated 2150, and in almost all of his games against d4 he's been playing c5 and transposing into a Benoni without e6. So after c5, d5, knight f6, let's say c4, d6 and g6. So usually he plays positions without pawn to e6. So I was preparing that, and in the game he played f5 instantly, which as far as I knew he's never played before. So I have a setup I play against this. I play a variation with c4 and bishop f4, which I find very interesting, without g3. So I basically give up the light square diagonal if my opponent wants to take it. So I start bishop f4, and this isn't going to be the London. It's just a setup I play because I played with c4. So knight f6, e3, e6, knight f3. This is all very common theory. b6, bishop e2, bishop e7, castles, bishop h3 prevents knight h5 ideas, which did not work before because I had bishop g5. Since the bishop is now on e7, black in some positions actually is threatening knight h5, castles, and c4. And here my opponent played the first mistake of the game. He played pawn to h6, which does nothing. Black isn't going to be playing for g5 because that's way too scary, and I'm never going to be playing bishop to g5 myself, so h6 is a waste of tempo. Instead, knight e4 is a good move, d6 is a good move, preparing knight b to d7, but okay, h6, knight c3, d6, this is fine. I played rook c1, and in this position he played a more significant mistake. So the way you play this position is to go for knight d7 and to play for e5. If you can play e5, then you have a good position as black. When white plays this setup with bishop f4, that's very hard to achieve. You should go for it regardless, maybe transfer the queen to the king side and so on. My opponent played c5, and this is an extremely weakening move. So whenever you play against the Dutch, if your opponent has pawns on c5 and f5, which should never happen from black's perspective, there are weaknesses that could drop d6 and e6, and more importantly, a pattern which I missed in this game continuously. You can strike at the center immediately with d5 and basically weaken all of black's pawns. In fact, in this position, d5 is very close to winning for white. I didn't consider it at all. So you sacrifice a pawn, this has to be taken, otherwise you take on e6. And if the e pawn advances forward, then your bishop has a safe square on h2, and the f5 pawn is weak and the d6 pawn is weak. So this is taken, and then bishop to d3, and there is no comfortable way to defend this. Basically, the engine says white is close to winning. I didn't see this. Instead, I played what I think is a very natural move, queen to b3, and this plays against cd4 because if cd4, then I have pressure on e6, and in some positions I will be playing for d5. Knight to c6. Now again, d5 is a good move. I should have played it here. I didn't. So with d5, if knight a5, the queen goes to c2, and the e pawn cannot take on d5 because queen takes f5. And if e takes d5, then knight takes d5, knight takes d5, c takes d5. For example, knight b4, a3, and knight a6 should give white a huge edge. You basically get this Benoni weakness on d6 without any counterplay. The bishop is not on g7, the f5 pawn is weak. you have the e6 square. It's not easy to get to e6, but if you can play b4, we can c5 and so on, you could be able to do it. Also, my knight has the c4 square. I can easily put pressure on d6. Instead, I played rook f to d1, which is a developing move, strengthening my center. Knight a5, queen to c2, and a6. Now, a6 is... It doesn't do anything. A6 basically weakens the b6 pawn, and black is never going to be playing b5 anyway because I'm defending it 3 times. So b5 is not happening, and what I should have done here is simply a3, b4, for example, rook b8, b4, and expanding on the queen side. Instead, I solidified with b3, freeing up my bishop, which isn't a bad move, but a3, b4 was more precise. The knight went back to c6, and in this position again, d5 was the way to go with a huge advantage. Now this line, I'd actually analyzed over the board after the game. So if d5, knight b4, then queen b1 puts pressure on f5, so e5 is basically forced, bishop h2. And now black's best probably is to play e4, but after knight h4, there are some tactical ideas here which are far beyond my level. So the knight is loose, so knight f takes d5, knight takes d5, knight takes d5, knight takes f5, rook takes, and cd. And this again, by the way, the pawn cannot be taken, because if bishop d5, rook d5, rook d5, bishop c4, white wins on the spot. This should be a huge advantage for white once again, because black structure is just horrible. Instead, I played bishop h2, which again isn't a bad move, but it doesn't punish my opponent's play. So d5 is a pattern I kept missing, and I could have gotten a very pleasant position early on. Okay, knight e4 played. I cannot take. If I take, then fe4, queen e4, and knight takes d4 is actually better for black, I think. Also, knight b4 is in the air. So I played a3, preventing knight b4. And here my opponent played a move which gave him a losing position, and I actually did capitalize on that. He played bishop to h4, and this is simply a losing blunder. This position is overwhelming for white now. Here is why. Black is going to have a pawn on e4, the bishop on b7 is going to be completely dead, d6 is going to be a weakness black cannot get rid of, and all of white's pieces work perfectly. So the sequence is more or less forced. Knight e4, pawn takes is forced. Knight h4, queen takes is forced. Now bishop to g3. Another option is bishop to g4, defending f2 with the queen, but they are equal, I think. Queen f6, and now dc5. If bc5, rook d6, or bishop d6, so dc5. Rook to d7 attacks the bishop, rook f7, and now rook c to d1. And this position is huge. Bishop pair, numerous weaknesses for black, b6, e6, e4. The rook is on the 7th rank, and white cannot lose control over it. There is no way. My opponent tried knight to d4, which doesn't work. I calculated this before playing rook cd1. I simply take on f7, and now knight e2 is forced, queen e2, queen f7, and rook back to d6. And if you turn on the engine here, it says +7 for white. It's just over. Okay, rook c8 played. I played queen to d2, threatening rook to d7, so rook e8. So if rook d7, rook e7. I took on b6. It's a free pawn. Now I'm material up, and black actually has 4 weaknesses I can target. Also, black's king is unsafe. Also, the bishop on b7 is unsafe. And in opposite colored bishop positions, usually if you're attacking, you have a great advantage. The most important feature here is the pawn on e4, which, if you're white, if it's free, you never want to take it, because this bishop is stupid. as long as the pawn stays on e4. Okay, my opponent played bishop c8. I played rook back to d6. He played queen f6, and here I played king h2, which is unnecessary, but I didn't want to allow any queen a1 ideas. If queen a1, I simply wanted to play rook e8. So king h2. More precise was queen a5, just threatening to take on c5, and there is no defense to that. Had I played queen a5, I think the game would have been over straight away. That being said, king h2 is still plus a million for white, and the game is on a high level basically over. My opponent tried h5, h4, g5, that has to be taken, takes. Now my opponent is threatening pawn to h4, so bishop to f4, queen g4, king to g1. I don't want to be running into any trouble with my bishop. If e5, I want to be able to play bishop to h2, h4, rook to d8. And here my opponent played king f7. Now, I had enough time on the clock. I think I had about 15 minutes. And I missed... this is the simplest tactic of the game, I think. You can pause the video, white to play and win. It's I would say a 1500 rated puzzle on Lee chess, something like that. I didn't see it. Here is why. I wanted to play rook d8 to trade rooks, so once he allowed it, now he cannot avoid the rook trade. Obviously if he takes, then I win the bishop. Once he played king f7, I took on e8 instantly. The winning tactic is takes the bishop, and if rook takes, queen to d7 check wins the rook. I mean, this is one of those positions where if someone tells you white to play and win, you find it in a second. I actually found this while I was in the bus going home, in my head. In the game, I just took the rook instantly. There was no thought process involved. He played king f7, I took the rook. Obviously, rook c8 is winning. This is still winning, but that way I'm a rook up, bishop up. He played king f7. In this position, I played queen to h8, and this is move 37. At this point, I was short on time, so I wanted to get to move 40. This is 90 minutes for 40 moves, and you get an extra 30 minutes after move 40, so I had 3 more moves to make. My opponent played e5, bishop e5, pawn to h3. This is my opponent's main threat, and this is why I had to calculate a lot before I played queen b2 and queen h8. So queen f6 check, king e8, and I repeated so that I could get to move 40. Now this is move 41, and I have enough time to think. And here is where I basically let my advantage slip. I had a winning position for the last 20 moves. I knew that I had to be winning, and that's correct. Of course, white is winning. Black has one threat. Me allowing h5, h4 is the first issue. Now, I didn't make any mistakes. That play was correct. My moves were correct. But I allowed counterplay. Now my opponent is threatening queen g2 mate. I have 2 options. I can either play... well, I have 3 options. I can play queen to g7, which isn't a good move because it trades queens and I may not win. So I can play bishop g3 or I can play g3. In the game, I calculated until mate and played pawn to g3, which leads to a forcing variation, after which the game is drawn. The correct way to play here is bishop to g3, and after hg2, which let's say is the only sensible move, you play bishop h4. And now probably the only defense is queen e6, and I can just go queen to g7, and I'm dominating the position. I'm going to be 2 pawns up. I'm threatening mate, so the queen is tied down, and this is game over. I didn't see... I saw bishop g3, but I didn't see the idea with bishop h4 and threatening mate. So I played pawn to g3, and the following moves are forced. Queen d1 check, king h2, and queen f1. Threatening mate in 1. Also threatening a perpetual if if I'm not careful. And I saw all of this before g3, and here is the line that I calculated. Queen g6, king d8, queen to g5 check, king to e8, queen to g8 check. Now, of course, if the king goes to d7, then it is checkmate. So, for example, here, 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 and here. And this is what I saw before I played pawn to g3. What I'd missed is that in this position, my opponent simply plays king e7. And at this point, I had 30-something minutes on the clock, and I started wasting too much time trying to find mate. There is no mate. There simply is no mate. I actually got down to about 2 or 3 minutes in the end, trying to find the win, not in this position, but in the next following moves, next few moves. So queen g7, king e8, queen g6, king d8, queen d6, king e8, queen c6. Okay, and in this position, my opponent should play bishop to d7. If my opponent plays bishop to d7, it's still a draw. Here he played king e7, and we actually drew the game after queen f6. I had 3 or 4 minutes on the clock. I played queen f6. He claimed a threefold repetition. Now it actually is winning. This is the first point at which is winning. The position is winning after g3, because he allowed me to take on c5 with check, and after king to d7 I can play queen c7, take this bishop, so king e6 takes with check, takes, and the point is that I get to play queen c5 and eventually take the pawn on e4. So for example, king e6, queen d5, and at any point when I take on e4, mate is no longer threatened. So for example, something like this. And if my opponent takes on f2, I can simply take on h3. There is no perpetual check. I'm 4 pawns up, and I'm going to win this position. During the game, I was frustrated, and I didn't see that. When he played king e7, I didn't consider taking on e4, defending mate, and actually looking for a win in a different way. I was focused on mating him. So when we drew the game, I just wanted to go home and eat, because I haven't eaten all day. I was frustrated. I didn't want to know where I'd missed my win. I knew that I was winning at several points in the game, but yeah, obviously this is the easiest win. Just take the bishop. Also in this position, queen a5 is an easy win. Just take on c5, don't force a trade. But yeah, what can you do? I drew the game, and the following morning the last round was played, and I'm going to show you the last game tomorrow. Last game I'm actually happy with. This was tough to digest for me, and after the game and before the morning round, when I got to the tournament hall, everybody kept asking me, weren't you winning? You were winning like this, and I said, just don't ask me anything. I don't want to talk about it. I know I was winning, I don't know how, and I don't care until the tournament finishes, which I think was a good decision, trying to stop thinking about my mistakes in round 8. Oof. Yeah, this is one of the most winning positions I didn't convert ever since I started playing chess. But that happens, and it shows that you have to be careful regardless of how good your position is. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned for more chess. See you tomorrow. Bye bye.